I'm Bill Cherry, and I'm one of the last 20 partners that own Sea-Arama. And I thought I would tell you a little bit about what happened over there so you'd know for sure. And you know that I know because we did a bunch of due diligence on the property before we bought it. Not nearly enough, by the way. The excuse me, Sea-Arama was the idea of Jack Dismukes, Dismucks, and he was a Venetian blind seller uh, in Austin. That he had a company, and he and his brother had inherited the Putt Putt golf course down on Stewart Beach. And he was quite a promoter. I don't not hold anything back from him. He truly was, and his heart was always in the right place. Be sure you remember that. There were no thieves in this thing. There just weren't. So what happened is that he went to a bunch of people, uh, both in Galveston and in Austin, that were his friends, and he raised the money to build Sea-Arama that operated for 25 years. The interesting thing is that other than the first year or so, Sea-Arama never made a profit. It always made a loss. And the way they would solve that is that the next year they would raise the price of the tickets. And when they raised the price of the tickets, that would get them through that year, and then it would be back to the same old thing again. They didn't have enough money to operate. So the various partners were putting money into the company so that it would continue to operate. They were essentially lending it money. Some of the company's friends that were in this venture included George Mitchell, Bobby Moody, and others. So the wealthy people were involved in it, as well as sort of regular people that had a little bit of money. I believe Dr. Henderson was also involved in it. He was a vet and was quite an enthusiastic investor, and he made some darn good investments. In any case, it operated and operated and operated, and they were trying to get rid of it. They wasn't getting around it. They wanted to get rid of it. And so a friend of mine came to me and he said, I think we can buy Sea-Arama. And I said, well, why would we want to do that? It doesn't make any money. And if the rich people own it, why would we own it? And his thought was, well, it needs some extra work on it. And there's other stuff that's happened out there in the meantime. And I think we could bring it around. There were 41 acres out there, of which about a third of it or so was actually used by Sea-Arama. The rest of it was up in the front, and it could be redeveloped for other things. Moody Gardens had just started when we were getting involved in it, and they were using the Moody Gardens thing as a deal for children and so forth that were disabled. And they had learned over a period of time that horseback riding and that sort of thing was a real good help in them overcoming much of their disabilities. And the disabilities for those people were mental. Okay. So the Moody Foundation bought a bunch of land down there behind Sea-Arama, and they built what essentially was a barn and some tracks to run around and so forth, and a little building and whatever else. And it wasn't supposed to make any money. That wasn't its purpose at all. It was to try to help solve the problem of children. Okay? So as time had it, Sea-Arama continued on, and they were there first, and then some years later, the Moody Gardens was there. And the way Bobby Moody got his brother to go along with this idea was he said that you can do a gardens deal with fancy flowers and all that sort of thing out there and make everything beautiful. And we'll have the horse thing on the other side and we'll split the difference. So they voted to do that. Some years later, not very far later, by the way, this was getting towards the end of it. Let's say it was at the 20th year or so, the 18th year, whatever, around in there. Um, a friend of mine called me and he said, I think we can buy Sea-A-Rama. And I said, I'm repeating myself, why would we want to do that? And he said, well, because there's a land out there to be developed and we own other land. And probably the smart thing for us to do would be to own as much of the land on the seawall as we can, and hopefully we could own all of it that's left, and then we would be able to control the price of selling it to other people. So, in any case, I thought about it, and I thought, why in the world has this thing never made any money? And the reason was it was overrun with expenses. You have to keep the animals, which is what they call the stock there, the dolphins and so forth. You have to keep them fed. You have to keep vets out there. You've got to keep them. You got to continue to have the show so they don't forget their show. And you got the big tank out there that's just running. You got to feed all these fish that are in the darn thing, which is something like 200 gallons of water. And with that, the part of all of this was there had to be a vet there, and there had to be somebody that understood how to handle these animals when they got sick and that sort of thing. So I remembered that my daddy had told me when I was first going into my first business, the one thing you never do is own something that has to eat. Remember that. Remember that, because that's one I did remember. So as time had it, we ended up getting 20 partners, and we did a joint venture. And the two of us were the general partners. We were the ones that had to operate it, and the others would just put money in. And so let's talk about this for a second. There were 18 people that didn't seem to think that it was anything different, that all these rich guys hadn't made any money, and that somehow or another we were going to be able to make money. I decided that the trick was to add hotels there. We should be able to put at least 2, if not 3 or 4 hotels there with Sea-A-Rama. And if we tied it to the Moody Gardens and so forth, it would be an attraction. And the hotels would carry the shortfall of the Sea-A-Rama. But I didn't tell anybody that. I just, okay, let's just do what we're doing. So I went to Houston. And if you recall, I had been in the real estate business for a very long time, and I knew a lot of people. And a lot of people trusted me, and I think they were right to do so. Unfortunately, this time they weren't. But I went to Houston, and I went to see a fellow that owned a bank. And I'm not going to tell you his name because it's unfair. And I said to him, this is what we've got. This is what we want to do. In order to do this, we've got to be able to build a hotel. Before we can close this thing, I want to be sure that we can build the darn hotel, that we aren't sitting out there with something we speculated on, and all of a sudden we found out that nobody wants to loan the money on a hotel. So he looked at it and so forth, and looked at some plans of hotels and what the costs were and that kind of thing. He was a very, very bright man. I want you to know this. He was very, very bright. His father had been in the banking business. They knew what they were doing. They had the cream of the crop of Houston wealthy people that banked with them. So he said, okay, I will give you a commitment for $10 million, and I want you to take it out in pieces. Buy the property, build a hotel, the first hotel, make it the smallest one of the ones you're going to build. If it works, then I will fund the second part, another hotel. And if that works, the two of them are working fine and they're not cannibalizing each other. I'll loan you money to do the third one. Okay, so that's where we were. And I didn't tell anybody that, by the way. That's just the way Bill operates. I don't tell everything I know. I just don't. It's not. That's my sister Debbie is the same way. She just, you don't ever really know the whole thing. You got to wait around, or you got to speculate what is going on in her little brain. Anyway, so we got ready to build to close the purchase, and Moody National Bank loaned us a bunch of money. And our partners had put in, I think, $20,000 a piece or something like that. And that, by the way, in a limited partnership, is all the money that they have, or the liability they have of loss. If they ever want to add more money in, it's fine, but then that becomes all the money that they can lose. Right? They can't end up being stuck on the bank note and all that sort of thing. So that's a really lousy idea, by the way. I'm just telling you for the front end. So the general partners do it the way they feel it should be done. So that's what we did. And J.R. McConnell, remember him, was buying everything under the sun, and everybody had pretty much decided he knew what he was doing, which he didn't have a clue what he was doing. He was stealing money. And thought maybe that he would buy Sea-A-Rama. Well, he wasn't going to buy Sea-A-Rama from us, that's for sure. He said he didn't want to have that thing at all. So we got ready to close, and a day or so before we closed, I called my friend in Houston, and I said, "Are we still on with the commitment letter?" And he said, "I'm really sorry to tell you this, but my bank has been taken over by the feds, and they have indicted me for misuse of the money of the bank." And he said, "And as you know, that simply is not true. Nevertheless, I can't fund the commitment letter. Therefore, you're going to find somebody else to do it. And I'm truly sorry." He said, "I don't tell people I'm going to do something that I don't do." Well, I've known him for 30 years. He was exactly right. He didn't do anything that one way or the other. So as it turned out, the next day we go into closing, and everybody has signed and that sort of thing. And we have their checks, and we were about $100,000 shy of the money we needed for the down payment. And there was a guy in the room who was representing us for something else, and he said, "Wait a minute," and he went downstairs in the bank building, which was at that time, I guess, the Hutchinson National Bank building, and he came back with a check and bought the other rest of it out. So we went out there, and we started studying the thing. We had a commitment from the sellers that everything up there was up to snuff. There were no violations of the law. All the property was in good shape. All the machinery was in good shape, and that there was no violations of any kind of environmental laws. I want to tell you that we weren't closed 5 seconds, and the feds came down, and they started going through that place. And it had deferred maintenance that was forever. The big tank was the one that was the most interesting because it had a crack in it, and they all knew, but it was going to eventually fail, and they would probably drown a bunch of people, but they were hoping there wouldn't be anybody in it at the time. And then after we closed, the guy that had been running it forever, which had promised us he would stay there and run it, came down to my office, and he walked in the door. I'd only seen him a couple of times. I didn't even know him. And he they had given him a car to use, and he came in and he put the keys down on my desk and he said, "I can't work for you." I said, "What?" He said, "I can't work for you. I will not work for you. Here's the keys to the car. This is my last day. I'm out of here." So, as it turned out, everything out there was bad. Everything was bad. There had all kinds of things against them that had happened there's no point in me going into among the employees and the people that ran it for us and all that sort of thing. And in Nothing Flat, Sea-Arama was out of money. I put another $200,000 in it to see if we could find somebody quick enough to get us out, and there wasn't anybody. And all those people that were partners didn't want to put their money in, any more money in. And I don't blame them, really. But nevertheless, it self-destructed. That's the story of Sea-Arama. And all the stuff that these people have that worked out there, that were mostly kids at the time, have great memories of it. They don't seem to have great memories of the fact that those things they were skiing in were so highly polluted that we were going to close them down and not let them use them. They didn't know that, and they didn't need to know it. I mean, they didn't need to know that we were going to close them down. That's just what they knew. So now you know the story of Sea-Arama. So what happened is that Dismukes and his people had to take the thing back. What I never could understand was why we didn't sue them for the loss of money. We lost a lot of money in that thing. And the contract was very clear. Everything out there is up to snuff, which it wasn't. Oh, my Lord, we spent, I don't know, several $100,000 within a short period of time trying to get the fish thing where everybody could eat the right fish. It was not going to spoil and all that sort of thing. There's something to do with the water pipe, spitting the water that came out of the tanks out into the Gulf directly without cleaning it. The pipe went underneath the seawall. That's the story of Sea-Arama. And what I learned out of that was that I would never be in another partnership. And that has nothing to do with those men that were in it. It has to do with Bill. I need to be what I am. I do what I do. And I'm going to tell you front up, if you're smart, you won't be in a partnership either. It just doesn't work. Okay? That's the story of Sea-Arama. Bye-bye.